Hello, welcome to Public Relations for Data Analytics, how to increase your impact by building trust and visibility. I'm Maggie Wolf, and while I am currently a data scientist, I started my career working in marketing and public relations after getting a bachelor's degree in communication. I eventually switched into marketing analytics and then product analytics, and now I'm in business analytics, data science, and I also have a master's degree in data science. But I have found that the things that became inherent to my work when working in public relations have been extremely useful for me now that I'm working in analytics and data science, specifically around not just communicating complex ideas, but also thinking about how you build trust and build partnerships with the teams that you support. And so I want to share some of the things that I learned that I regularly use in my work. So these are the topics that I'm going to go through in this presentation, so let's get into it. First, I want to clarify what is public relations, so you get a good idea of what it isn't. I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking public relations is all about spinning a message and cherry picking your message and things like that. And while that can be public relations, that's not what it should be. Public relations is the ongoing practice of shaping perception through clear communication, earned credibility, and consistent presence. And so it is ongoing. It is something that you're always doing. You're always building your reputation and building trust and sharing your messages. It is clear. It is easy to understand. It is digestible. Your messages are getting across and landing accurately with your audiences. It helps you build credibility through trust and understanding. And your presence will be felt even when you're not in the room if you can build a good PR practice for yourself. And so what it looks like is proactive storytelling. So thinking about how you can connect with your audience. So I know we talk a lot about data storytelling, but storytelling is a, core activity in public relations and is the root of what we do. And then there's also relationship building. So really thinking about why should your audience trust you? How can you build that trust and credibility with them? And then it's about creating visibility. So making sure that the right people know what you can do, what you can offer, and they think about you. And also managing your perception. So what can they expect from you? What can you deliver? What quality of work? What timelines? And so all of these things go into building your reputation, which is, building your PR practice for yourself. And so why public relations matters for data teams. Data storytelling is just the start. I know this is, very common in analytics. We love our data storytelling, but that is just kind of scratching at the surface of kind of thinking about PR for yourself. So take a step back and think about what challenges do you face when you're working with other teams or presenting your work, and PR can help you overcome some of these challenges. So one common challenge is a lack of action. You delivered a great analysis, but then nothing changed in the business, and you were left wondering what is the point of all this work that you do? Why are you doing these projects and analyses and building these models if they're not actually making an impact? Why is there this lack of action? And then there's a challenge of a lack of visibility when the business side has no idea what you can do, what you can offer, what your team can bring, and the problems that you can solve. And you miss out on more opportunities for collaboration and impact. Or even the business might start seeking out other partners to solve problems that you can solve and provide the same services just because they don't know what you can offer. You don't have that visibility. Then there's the challenge of a lack of trust. And I've seen this a lot with very smart folks where they just jump straight into their analysis and they don't provide any context or background or explain, why they even did this analysis. And their audience is left questioning, do they understand their world? Do they understand the problem that they're solving? Can you trust their recommendations if they haven't even established that? And then finally, a lack of understanding. I know we all have spent a lot of time learning some very complex ideas and brushing up on our technical skills, our statistical knowledge, and all of that. But if your delivery is too technical or advanced for your audience, they won't understand you. They won't be able to follow your messages, follow your insights or recommendations. They won't know what to do next. They won't understand you. And you might feel very smart, but your audience won't feel smart. And you don't want that. That's not a good start to your relationship together. So PR is how you can close the gap between the great work that you do and the real impact that you want to make. So the first step is knowing your audience. This is kind of the core foundation of public relations. So for you working in data analytics, think about how will your audience use this information? And I always like to say, keep it human. Behind your work is a human. They're either the humans are in the data that you're analyzing or they're making a decision. And so think about what matters to them. What do they need to make their decisions? What information are they lacking so that they can make this decision? How can you provide that? And then think about what moves them. What metrics and results will they act on? So, you might share all the data that you have, but if it's not expressed in something that really matters to them, then they're not going to be as motivated to act on it or to utilize your recommendations. So think about what moves them. Is it revenue? Is it visitors, users? Is it, money saved? What is going to get them to act? And then the last idea is something that I haven't really seen a lot, but I think is very important, is this idea of creating a safe space. Again, as I mentioned, we are very smart people. We have very complex ideas and complex terms that we like to use, but that isn't always what your audience is going to respond to. And that isn't always that they're not always going to be able to follow what you're saying. And then they won't feel safe asking questions. They'll worry that they might come off sounding like they don't understand. And that's not a good look for them, especially if this is, in a business context, in a business meeting where their boss or their peers are around. And so you want to make sure that you're creating this safe space for your audience so that they can not only follow what you're saying, but they can understand it at a high enough level that they can ask questions. So to reiterate, behind every data point is someone making a decision. So make sure you frame your work around their success and not your method. So when you're presenting to executives, they really care about ROI, impact, decisions. So you need to get to the point quickly. A lot of times you won't have a lot of time to share your work with them. So you just, get to the point. You can skip how you got there and just get to the end and tell them how they should prioritize their resources, because really that's what they are pretty much doing all day. And so focus on the business impact, the financial implications, and clear recommendations that they can take away. And then your business partners. I like the thought of, make them your hero. They're the hero of your story, your data story. And so think about what impacts their goals, what they need to know to make a decision. Make sure that the language and visuals you use are digestible so that your hero understands them. Connect your findings to their challenges and provide actionable next steps that they can own, because ultimately they will be the ones owning them. And then finally, you can save all of the, complex ideas and academic language for your analytical peers. They want to know about your methodology, your assumptions. They want to learn. They want to hear all the technical details, the limitations you face, the alternatives you considered. They want to know what reproducible methodologies they can bring to their work. And you can share your insights that would apply to their area of work as well. Another idea I like is think about their algorithms for processing and using information. I got this from a book I read recently. I'll share it at the end, but it's all about, communication. We're very comfortable thinking in algorithms. So remember that the people that you talk to, their brains, they also have their own algorithms that they're processing. So try to think about the algorithm of the person that you're presenting to and try to follow that when you share your analysis. And so next, it is important to build relationships. So I think it can be very easy to fall into the trap of just showing up in meetings with data that says a project failed. And that is not the reputation that you want. That is not going to build a positive relationship. You're just going to be this negative voice sharing data that says that they failed. No one likes to hear that. So how can we work around this so that even when we are delivering a message of failure, that we're still building a positive relationship? And so we really want to make sure we're positioning ourselves as a partner who brings both analytical rigor and business judgment. You're not just an analyst, you're an advisor. So how do we do that? First, making sure that you understand their world, that you understand and learn their objectives and challenges and limitations. And also make sure that you show that you're invested in their success. If you all work for the same company, I think that's very easy. Their success is your success. But make sure you show that, the work you do is to help them achieve success. And make sure you don't just have one-sided meetings where you're just talking about your work. So again, use that time to understand their objectives, challenges, limitations, ask for more business context, ask what work led up to whatever they're asking you for, the backstory, ask what they have coming up, and really understand, what they're thinking about and what they're working on and what problems they're solving. And of course, This can also lead to more opportunities for collaboration. And make sure you lead with curiosity. I think we're very curious people. I think that's why we work in data analytics. And so definitely bring this to your relationships with the business. Make sure you're asking questions before you dive in so that you are clear and understand the background and goals of a project. You understand the different use cases of how your work is going to be applied. You understand any constraints that you are working under or the team you're supporting is working with. And so make sure you understand the decisions that they are trying to make, what information is missing that is preventing them from making the decision today, and what does success look like so you understand how to communicate your findings to them. And next, make sure you are being collaborative and not critical. Again, you're not just dropping into meetings saying, here's the data that shows your project failed, that it is, these are findings, these are opportunities, it's not judgment. And that, again, you share their success, you're invested in their success, and you share their goals. And so, if they failed, you want to work together to turn that around. Another thing I like to do is don't be the one to say that it failed. Show the data and then ask them, what patterns do you see? What do you think is driving this? What do you think we should do next? What are you concluding from this data? And they might be the one to point out that it failed. And then you're not the one delivering the bad news, just the data that showed the bad news. And finally, offer solutions and support. So don't just find issues, but suggest next steps and make sure you position yourself as a resource to help achieve goals. So, which next steps are achievable, what would be most impactful, and what do you need to make that happen? So if something failed, you are a resource to figure out why and to help them move on and figure out what to do next. And in a dream world, we can help our business partners become our advocate, where they bring you into projects at the start. They don't just come in after something launched and then say, hey, can you tell me if this was successful or not? That they bring you in at the beginning where they're defining what success looks like or what they're even trying to do. And, you can start thinking about, are we even collecting the right data? Are we tracking the right metrics, et cetera? And then they can evangelize your work to their peers and leadership, especially if they invite you to co-present your part of their decision making. And so that can get you in front of more audiences, that can get you more visibility and showing other parts of the business what you're capable of. And in the age of AI, it is very important that we're not just order takers, that we are partners. Because I think, there's a lot of things that can be automated about our work, but if we're true partners and problem solvers and we take the time to understand them and think of problems to solve together, that's something that AI, at least as of today, isn't really doing very well. Another idea is to make sure when you're presenting your work that you're balancing simplicity and transparency. And I say don't sabotage yourself because I have done this myself when presenting my work. So what I mean is, you know, one thing is don't wow them with academic language because if they don't understand what you're saying, they're not going to be wowed. They're just going to be confused and they're going to be struggling to keep up with you. And then they're not going to know what are your insights and takeaways and recommendations because they're still trying to figure out what are you even talking about. And so make sure you meet your audience where they are, that you're using common language alongside or in place of technical or scientific terms, because you might feel smart using them, but your audience won't feel smart if they can't follow you. So make sure that whatever you're saying, they can follow you. They can follow your story from beginning to end. When it comes to visuals, there's so much information out there, so I'm not going to go into detail about data visualization because there are plenty of people who can do it better than me. But one thing to keep in mind is, I mean, this is literally our marketing materials. This is how our world is visualized. This is our image. And so you don't want to overcomplicate things. Keep it simple, reduce cognitive load, and make your visuals easy to interpret. You want the message to be very clear. And so someone without any context can come to the same conclusions as you. I think it's very easy to overcomplicate our visuals or to create our visuals from a place of all of our knowledge and context of the data. But when you're presenting it to someone, they're not going to have that huge breadth of exploratory data analysis that you did. And so make sure that the visual itself can stand on its own because it's very likely that someone might take a screenshot or pull out one slide and share that later. And then, is their audience going to be able to understand what is this visual communicating? What's the message? What's the takeaway? So make sure your visuals standalone can do that. And then also think about the MVP. So when you're thinking about impact and trust and visibility, delivering more quick wins can help with that. It can help deliver more impact. And so don't over engineer projects, at least not at the start. Focus on, breaking into smaller parts and getting a quick win. And this can also save you time if this solves the problem. But sometimes I think we get so excited about new fancy tools and solutions and models that we want to, find a project to use them. And sometimes we over engineer things. And I don't think that's doing us any favors. And then when it comes to, putting together your slides and thinking about what to include in presentations, only share what is necessary. So on the one hand, you want to acknowledge limitations. You want to disclose constraints that could impact decision making. This can build trust and prevent costly mistakes. This is very important for our image. But you don't want to drown in caveats. I think if you have too many acknowledgments and limitations and you share everything, that can be distracting. So make sure you focus on what matters for the decision at hand. What do they need to know? And remove any unnecessary information that could be distracting. And make sure you filter yourself because whatever you share can become the focus of the discussion. You might think that you're doing a good job by acknowledging a limitation or something or disclosing it in like the footnote of a slide. But someone might see that and get fixated on it and start asking questions about it, and suddenly it derails your presentation. So if it doesn't matter, don't include it. Put it in the appendix in case it comes up, but don't put more information that is necessary on your slides. You want to make sure to filter yourself, manage the message. This is classic PR. What do they need to know? And then some more things for visibility and trust is building in public. Let them see how you think, let them see how you work, and give them opportunities to contribute as well. And so if they can see how do you get from, an idea or a question to the output you deliver, you don't need to get, into the details and get too complex. You can keep it very high level, but a lot of teams really appreciate kind of knowing, how you got from the start to the finish. And you can talk about the data you used. I find this very helpful because a lot of times your business partners are closer to the data you're working with, like closer to how it's collected and stored and what it all means. And so by talking to them about the data you're using, sometimes you can get feedback, you can find better data sources or learn nuances that you weren't aware of at the start. And then also sharing methodologies used. Again, you don't have to get too complex, but sometimes they appreciate, they might hear about things like A/B testing or regression or XGBoost or whatever. And like those might just be buzzwords to them. But if you can kind of explain at a high level what it is, they sometimes appreciate that. Um, and of course, make sure you share updates to stay on track so that if you are kind of veering off track, you can course correct. Or if you solve their problem before you think you did, then that can save you time. Another thing that's helpful is hosting a learning session. So if there's something common that you're doing that you feel like maybe they don't have a full understanding of this, do like a brown bag lunch session. So this has been really helpful on previous teams I've been on around like A/B testing and kind of explaining the statistics behind A/B testing, especially with product teams, because they're the ones that are kind of launching the test and a lot of times coming up with test ideas. And so, it may have been a while since they took a statistics course, or maybe they never took one. And so kind of doing that review, I found that has gone over very well. And then make sure you're including their input. So if you're defining a new metric or defining an audience, again, they're very close to the data, they're very close to the audience, so their feedback and input is valuable. I've also seen that they can be very helpful on a data governance review. Again, because you want to make sure that you're defining things in a way that makes sense for the business, and makes sense for the audience. Doing a session to brainstorm assumptions and hypotheses, this can be really helpful because you can kind of see where's their brain at. And you can start to get some insights and come up with new project ideas. And then finally, providing peer review for their tests or their analysis. So again, if you're supporting a team that does a lot of A/B testing, doing a regular peer review session can be helpful where you can provide feedback to their test design. They can provide feedback for each other. And this just makes things very collaborative. And again, it builds trust. And then sharing demos, doing an open invitation and showing off your new deliverables, your dashboards, your metrics, models, analysis, et cetera, the things that you're building, assuming that they are allowed to be shared with other teams, kind of share them in this open demo, and then they can see what are the problems you're solving for other teams, and then this can lead to more opportunities for collaboration. And then finally, how to be your own publicist. So, how can you build strategic visibility, which can open doors to greater influence? So, what are the literal things that you can do as your own publicist? So, one thing is sharing your wins and your impact in channels on Slack or Teams or whatever your company uses. So, one example with a previous team I was on, we were supporting product managers. And the product managers had their own channel for talking about all of the new features they were shipping, all of the new work that they were, launching. And so the product analytics team, we started sharing our own things that we were launching as well, because it was, if we were launching a new metric or a new dashboard, we started posting in that channel as well so that we could get visibility with the same audiences. And then look for opportunities to present to more audiences. So if you know that your stakeholder or business partner is presenting a project that you supported, ask if you can co-present with them. So this can get your face in front of more teams, in front of leadership. You could talk about your team's capabilities and kind of find more opportunities for collaboration. And then contribute to company news. So if your company has an internal newsletter or an all hands or something like that, uh, look for opportunities to share your big wins, your big projects. Again, this is a great opportunity to get visibility and to just kind of build your reputation. So maybe this is co-presenting with your business partners or just presenting your own work. And then finally, if your company has a tech blog or they post regularly on your LinkedIn, on their LinkedIn page, you can position yourself as a thought leader by getting your work included in these things. So again, the big projects, the innovative things you're doing, see if you can, get them publicized this way. And then also present at industry conferences. So not just data conferences, but whatever industry you're in, look for opportunities to talk about data science, machine learning, AI, and the applications. And then this can really position your company as, cutting edge, advanced, and kind of show off the cool work that your team is doing. And then create a team charter. Even if this is something that you don't share with other teams, having the alignment and consistency is really helpful. Again, you want to manage their expectations around what you can deliver. And so having a team charter can really achieve that. So we've reached the end. Some key takeaways on some PR tips that you can implement for yourself. So always think audience first. This is very core to public relations. Everything we do is for an audience. So make sure that they are front and center and what you're delivering is designed for them. And so make sure, in your presentations that you're tailoring to what your viewers, your audience values and how they're going to use your insights. You're solving the problems that are relevant to them. You're thinking about the metrics that matter to them. So really everything is just catering to that audience. Make sure you're taking the time and the effort to build trust. So you're understanding their part of the world, their part of the business, how they measure success, you're understanding the problems they solve, the trade-offs that they deal with, the limitations, and you are establishing credibility through your business understanding that they know when you deliver your analysis or your model or whatever, they know that you understand the problem they're solving, you understand their side of the business, and they're going to trust that what you deliver is going to be valuable and useful for them. And then finally, look for opportunities to gain visibility. So how can you get yourself or your work in front of more eyes, in front of more parts of the business? How can you actively share your successes and build your team's reputation and influence? So as I mentioned, the book where I got, that talked about the algorithms and thinking about the algorithms of the audience that came from People Skills for Analytical Thinkers. So it's an ebook. Very helpful, I think. We all have very analytical brains and we're all thinking about algorithms all day long. So it's, kind of an easy transition to think about that in terms of the people that you're communicating with and working with. And then I also love the Trending Up newsletter. It's really great for data visualization and also just thinking about delivering messages and how to be very succinct and impactful in the messages and the visualizations that you are putting out there. So thank you for listening. I hope this was helpful for you. Feel free to find me on LinkedIn and connect. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions. You can reach out to me directly.